Hi, I'm Nicholas Marchanda, and today for 461, we're going to be covering a bunch of stuff for cardiac heart stuff. Very sophisticated language, I know, but we have a lot to go over, and frankly, not a lot of time to do it. So let's get started. All right, so right now, we're looking at a pressure graph for a left ventricle and aorta relationship. The black is the left ventricle. The red is the aorta. So you'll know, this is time V pressure by the ways, and right here you have volume too, but I'll talk about both as I explain this, right? I'll try to get my beautiful mug in there. So you'll see that the pressure in the left ventricle, shucks, not a strong start. For the left ventricle, starts off very small, right? We get some blood, but it doesn't really change the pressure, right? It's not about the quantity of blood that increases the pressure, right? But here we have this massive spike in this AV valve, and the AV is, I don't know why I wrote AV, but it should be the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve, the valve between the left atrium and the, AV's atrium and ventricle, I forgot. Usually I write bicuspid, but same difference. The valve between the atrium and the ventricle has closed now, and it will begin to contract. It goes high, goes high, goes high, goes high, and eventually hits the point where the pressure outside of the semilunar valves for the aorta inside of the heart is greater than the pressure and weight of the blood sitting outside of it. And that's what this little hump indicates. It finally pushes through, pushes out the blood in the left ventricle, and then closes again once the pressure on the outside is greater than the pressure on the inside. And that key moment right there, when it closes again, right, and the blood sits back in it, is the dicrotic notch, right? It closes again. And you know that blood's gone now. It's no longer contracting. The pressure drops completely. You know, we're in diastole now, we're chilling. And that's it until we hit the next wave. And that's our heart rate. Here on the bottom, I'll be much quicker about this part. We see volume, and this is for the left ventricle as well. You'll see we're at the peak right here for the end of diastolic cycle right here. And that pretty much means this is your heart right before it begins to go through systole or contract. And so naturally it's chock full of blood, roughly 120 milliliters. It'll contract and lose all of it, go back around 50 milliliters, and it'll begin to the refill process again. And I'm just running through all this stuff. I know it sounds like I'm talking a lot and really quick, but trust me, this is the tip of the Hartberg, the iceberg. Like, there is a lot of stuff we're doing here. And so now I'm going to run through calcium real quick and why that's so relevant for pretty much every aspect of muscle cells, but cardiac is a muscle cell, so we'll run through it real quick. So apologies. So this calcium, especially through the T-tubules, enters the blood and opens those initial channels. But the main purpose of these should be an A. It's not carbon. It's calcium, not carbon. So these calcium channels, like, their main job is to get inside of the cardiocyte or whatever, cardiomyocyte, and open up the sarcoplasmic reticulums and the Reardine channels here, and open them up, and it opens up the sarcoplasmic reticulum, dumps a ton of calcium in, and all of that calcium opens up the troponin C, right? It falls off or it doesn't fall off, gets on, exposes the myosin, right? And exposes the actin. Oh, I'm mixing it up now in my head. My apologies. And attaches to it, right, and pulls it, right? The myosin pulls it, but the troponin exposes it, right? It's a very similar to all the other muscle cells we've talked about. Finally, we have circa and this is like once the process is over, right? We can assume the process is clean and over with and done. The circa pumps, right? Pumps back all the calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And for any that's left over, we have our sodium calcium pumps featuring here. Pretty cool, pretty new as far as I remember. And 3 sodiums are pumped in for every 1 calcium pumped out. We're just trying to return back to our undisturbed state so we can return and do this all over again, because your heart's job is never done until it is, and when your heart's job is done, it's no longer your problem. Ooh, I get to talk about sounds as well. So there's lub and then there's dub, and they're super cool, right? And they're born from the sounds that your blood makes, not from entering, but from like hitting the walls, right? And so your blood, when it leaves the left atrium and gets into the left ventricle and like hits the walls there and hits the walls against the bicuspid valve, that produces your lub sound, right? Because it's going in, it's hitting against it, flushing back against it, and that's your lub sound. I don't know why I'm saying unfortunately. It's good that we're having these lub-dub sounds. For dub, though, it's when the blood on top of or going through the semilunar aortic valve, it's rushing through, and then when it suddenly closes, right, during this dicrotic notch, it closes, and the blood tries to rush back in, hits it, boom, dub, right? And that's how we get our 2 sounds. Lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. And if you hear sh in between it, it could be a number of things, right? And I don't believe I have to talk about it right now, but it's like, I'm trying to remember the specifics. If there's a sh right before the dub sound, I believe that's indicative of stenosis. Yeah, I'm right. So it's lub, sh, dub. That is aortic stenosis. You have lub, sh, dub. That's mitral murmur. And you have lub, dub, sh, which the sh after the dub indicates a semilunar leak. Then a third sound altogether is a gallop, and that can be a number of things, from you're going to die soon to very general diagnosis. I'm a doctor, no. But it could also be your heart's just too small right now, and you're like a kid growing up, and as you get older, your heart grows, right? And yeah, third sound will just go away, and it's not an issue. But that's outside of the, what's the word I'm looking for, boundaries of this video. But we're going to keep moving on because we're 8 minutes in. I'm like 1/4 of the way through. And so, okay, I don't believe I'm missing anything. I get to talk about epinephrine and acetylcholine, right? Or no epinephrine, I should say, although they serve functionally the same purpose. So no epinephrine runs through a long, complicated chemical process, but essentially all you need to know is no epinephrine activates a G protein, right, in the myocyte or whatever. The G protein then activates, I believe, adenyl cyclase. Then adenyl cyclase produces CAMP, and CAMP produces PKA. And PKA is a dog, if you want a sympathetic response. PKA will save your mom. Like, I'm trying to look at the list here. Like, PKA, like, it will uninhibit, it'll go after a phospholambdin, I remember that. And it will uninhibit the circa pumps so your heart can relax faster, right, and pick up its calcium quicker so it can pump quicker. It'll make it easier to open up those calcium channels so you get more calcium, right, and it increases the rate of your heart, like chronotropy, right? It increases, it increases the quantity of calcium, which for reasons I'll discuss later, increases the force of contraction, that plateau, right? We'll get to that soon enough. And it goes over, I know I'm missing something, like it makes it easier for troponin to get out of the way, which makes it easier for your heart to pull, or not your heart, your myocytes to get your cardiocytes working and all of that. It is a dog. PKA will get it going. So that begs the question, what does acetylcholine do? And the answer is the exact opposite. Acetylcholine is also complex. It hits I believe a G protein. I'm going to cheat here and check. Yeah, it hits a muscarinic 2 response. I think that's a G protein. Regardless, it does this by decreasing the quantity of CAMP, and it thusly decreases the quantity of pKa. We're sad to see it go, but fortunately it's just another molecule and doesn't have feelings, and it's not really real that way. And it can also open up additional potassium channels like GERK. And GERK, gotta catch my breath. GERK, being an additional potassium channel, like we've learned before, more potassium channels increases permeability, which increases hyperpolarization of the cell, which means it's harder for it to activate. And so if you want a sympathetic response, you'll want more epinephrine or no epinephrine. If you want a parasympathetic response, which is like your slow heart rate, your heart's not beating hard. It's very, I say relaxed, but even relaxed is slower too, your heart. So it's just going slower all the way through. It's just very calm. You want acetylcholine, which I think is pretty neat. I believe that covers it right here. I should mention vocabulary here. Lusitropy is in regards to speed of relaxation. Tonotropy is force of contraction, right tone. And then chronotropy, which is like Chronos, the Greek god of time, is heart rate. I hope you enjoyed that trivia. But remember, no epinephrine. Think it through. This is like a sympathetic response. Does it increase chronotropy? Does it increase tonotropy? And does it increase or decrease lusitropy? The answer is it increases all three. Because if your heart's going to contract longer and harder, it needs to relax quicker. And if it relaxes quicker, it can beat harder, right? These things affect each other. And it's just the exact opposite for acetylcholine. Perfect. Let's move down the aisle here. We're 12 minutes in, and we still have a crazy amount to go through, Jiminy Crickets. All right. Perfect. The blue doesn't show up too well on my screen, so I'll be sure to voice it through when I walk through it. But, yeah. Oh, I got to draw for you. Okay. So, we'll start with, let's start from right to left, or your left, my right. Autorhythmic cells, these guys dance to the beat of their own drum, as indicated by the autorhythmic site. Auto, like by itself, like an automatic gun. That rhythmic, auto rhythm, by itself rhythm. I think that makes a lot of sense. So starting beneath the threshold, we have our hyperpolarized state, or polarized state, I should say, and we have our HCN funny channels. If you don't remember anything else I cover, remember these. They're very unique and I think really cool because they open better in hyperpolarized conditions. I think that's really neat because it's like a planned timer in your body. And I think that's just super unique. You don't really see that all too often. Maybe you do, but I haven't seen it too often yet. And so, it gets gradually, whether it's outside sources or just the HCN getting more and more open over time from hyperpolarization, it hits threshold, and kada bing, ba-boom, we got our voltage-gated calcium channels. This is stuff we've seen before, and we'll probably see it again. Calcium rushes into the cell, hits its peak, voltage-gated and other potassium channels open. It falls like a rock. It hyperpolarizes. What does hyperpolarization mean for the cell? HCN is more open. And we're back on top. The voltage-gated channel's open again, and we run through it. And this is our heart rate determined by the autorhythmic cells. I think that's really beautiful. I'm a big fan. Like, it sounds fake when I say it out loud. I really do enjoy this. Now we have our cardiomyocytes. I was trying to look for a joke there, something about Cardi B. Couldn't think of anything. So I think I'll just get back to teaching. I'll shut up. But, all right, so we're looking at, this is a bit of trivia. I just think it's interesting. You'll note that it starts at negative 90 millivolts, which is really close to the resting membrane potential for something that's completely permeable to potassium. So that should indicate to you that these things are incredibly permeable to potassium, right? And so we know that it gets stimulated, it opens up voltage-gated, I think voltage-gated sodium channels. Let me make sure I'm not spreading false doctrine here. But those voltage-gated channels, it is voltage, right? I believe so. They open. I'm not sure if it's voltage-gated. I know it's sodium channels. I'm pretty sure they get open. Yeah, regardless, they get open, and then it hits its peak. Then right here we have potassium. Well, we also have calcium elongated channels opening right for this plateau here. And during this time, your cardiomyocyte is flexed, right? So longer the plateau, longer the flex. But we have our calcium channel open, it's flexing, and as it crosses this peak, your body's going to start to fight to hyperpolarize again, so it can begin a new contraction, right? Because imagine if your body was stuck at that plateau state. What would that mean? You're screwed. That's what it would mean. It would mean your heart's in a permanent state of contraction, and you're like, and you're dead. Frick, okay. And so we have a few different channels here that we're going to run through, 3. And so we have our ultra-rapid potassium channel, the ultra-rapid, right? It goes first, opens, not enough potassium's leaving to hyperpolarize us. Next we have our potassium rapid channel open, still not enough, but we're starting to crest the edge here, right? So we're getting somewhere. More potassium's leaving. And then finally, you have your potassium slow channel. And obviously, like ultra rapid, rapid, slow, that's just indicative of how long it takes for them to open. Finally opens, and then we finally hit the crest and it drops off. And it's marked with IK1. Sorry, I'm just trying to ITO2. Yeah, I don't think, sorry, I led you astray. That's not a calcium thing. That's usually marked as a ITO2 or ITO1. I think that is a calcium channel. I'm sorry. That part as to what is at the peak. I know there's a calcium channel, long calcium channel open. That causes the contraction. I'm just having a hard time reading my handwriting here. But I'll just move on. For the very top, yeah, I think it's just a potassium channel because it hits the top. It hits the top. That channel opens, and then it goes down a little bit. That would make sense because it's permeable more, and thus it's not as less polarized. Okay, I spent a lot of time yapping about that, but that is important, right? Because these are your rhythm makers and then your rhythm effectors here, right? And we'll talk about end-stemming and stemming a bit. I wrote that down to remind myself not to forget about it because I have done stuff like that before. But now we're going to run through an average heart wave and how it works, right? And so now I'm going to take this here. Oh, you can actually see it quite well. You'll appreciate my artwork then. All right. So let's start with the P wave, right? So the heart right now, it's depolarized, right? And the way we measure it is top left is negative, bottom right is positive, right? And we're far more interested in the direction of the charge rather than the we are interested in polarity, but the polarity relative to the direction it's going to, right? So if there's like a negative charge traveling to the positive, that's marked as up. If there's a positive charge going to the negative, that's marked as up. If there's a negative going to a negative, that's marked as down. So it's all about going to opposites, really. in the end here. I just wanted to emphasize that point because we're going to be having a negative wave travel throughout the heart here as the heart polarizes and all that. And electric waves will travel near towards the plus, and so that'll cause our initial P. So this will be conserved. Can you see what I'm pointing to? There we go. So the initial wave will be conserved to the atriums here, and it'll go to the SA point, the sinoatrial point, and the negative wave will go down and down and down, which will cause this wave to wax and wane in strength. And shucks, that's the title for the Brandon Sanderson series, Wax and Wane, right? The two main characters, they wax and wane. Frick. I just got that. Oh, wow. I'm sorry, that was completely unrelated. All right, we're going to keep going. So, frick. All right, where was I? Yeah, atriums, it's conserved. This for P wave conserved to the atrium. They run it through, get to here, and the wave is initially extinguished for a bit. Then we get to the Q wave. Now we're down near the ventricles. There will be an initial wave going more up and left, like back towards the negative. And remember, negative running towards negative, what does that mean? It goes down. So that's why we see a little down point right before the big little R. The R, it's exactly what it sounds like. It swings towards the ventricles, especially towards the left-hand side, I want to say. But it swings towards it. Let me double check that I'm not preaching false doctrine. Perfect. Yeah, I'm about right. And so essentially it'll rush down, covering most of the ventricles, really. And so that's why you get this huge peak, because there's a lot of stuff getting polarized here. And then we get to S, right? And the S, now your body's just clearing out the edges of the epicardium, like going up and around, and some of those charges go back up, so it's negative to negative, and then it's it's negative, it flips down. And then we have our T wave, and our T wave is just the opposite, because now our heart is putting positive charges all the way back because we made everything negative, but positives are in fashion, and it pushes everything back. I say pushes back. That's really not true. That's how I think of it. It pushes back as in makes everything normal again, like making it positive. So it can get depolarized again. And a heartbeat begins anew. In fact, as I described this process for the past 23 minutes or so, my heart probably beat at about 70 beats per minute, relying on this exact process, meaning 70 times 20, that's 140. I want to say 14,000, or is it 140,000 times my heart has just beat, relying on this exact process, which is sort of crazy when you think about it. In fact, I'm going to do the math for it right now because I think that's such a gnarly idea. 20 times 70. Yeah, 1,400 times. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. No, I'm right. Oh, whatever. Wait, what? That's 12. Okay, I shouldn't be doing math right here. My heart's been beating a lot is what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry for wasting your time here, and I was just yapping about how we had to rush through this. Is there anything I'm forgetting? STEMI and non-STEMI. All right, here's STEMI. Okay, I'm going to erase all of this, and I'm going to draw a STEMI. So a STEMI can do a few things. One of the most notable of which is invert the T wave. That's because it's strange, really. here's the wall of their left ventricle. Here's a non-STEMI. A bunch of dead stuff, right? And so usually, so this dead stuff, it can't conduct a charge. It can't run a charge. And it'll make the waves around it sort of go in weird directions. And it can even flip the T wave, right? Which, if you remember, is supposed to be a happy bump, right? And not this, but it can. Because remember, is these positive charges, like they're supposed to run through here and work its way through towards the negative, which creates that happy bump. Sometimes what can happen is you can cause it to run like this, causing the positive to, at least for a bit, initially run towards the same positive side, which causes that flip. And so this is an N-STEMI, which is a not STEMI in medical shorthand. Yeah. And a STEMI can cause a ST elevation, right? So like usually it's like this, but it can also cause like this, something like that. Right? It elevates the S and T. Okay. How do I want to draw this? Probably the same way as last time. And a STEMI is awesome. Well, not really. You have a STEMI, you're probably dead if you don't get immediate chemical care. Because now, instead of just a part, you have a whole transmural infarction. And that will kill this whole block. And that will mean that for this whole block, it will be unable to conduct charges. And because of that change in electronegativity, it will no longer, for the S and T part of the waves, it can't. Yeah, it just screws with the whole thing. And it can cause a whole bunch of irregularities, such as the S and T elevation. Because this part of the heart is dead, charges, both positive and negative, can't run through it, and so run away from it. And that's a brief explanation of STEMI and non-STEMI. I covered just about everything, I believe. Thank you for watching and your time, and have a wonderful day.